So welcome back. I hope you found the breakout to be meaningful. My deepest hope is that you experienced the value of personal response as a lever to the learning, whether it was an entry into the learning or the exit. Often in which does belong and why, it's a way to find out what kids know going into a content area, but we can also use it as a formative assessment. In the iconic event task, by definition, you were asked to make a decision about something's value being more important to you than something else. Now, how you chose to see that importance, is it an economic importance, a social importance, an emotional importance? In both of these tasks, there is ambiguity. And while we talk about teacher clarity, I want absolute teacher clarity in how to think in a moment across the rigor divide. But personal response that has too much clarity will end up being a repeat of the teacher's modeling. So we have to value that moment of teacher clarity in terms of the content thought or the content application, or do kids know what to include when they have their unique personal response within the content? And now I'd like to talk about our past realities. In the 17,124 classrooms across the United States that made up our original research study, Dr. Garver and I were coding the tasks that kids did to see how often the tasks landed on the left-hand side of the rigor divide and on the right-hand side, truly crossing the rigor divide. And with our rubric or our matrix here that's in front of you, you'll see again that there are levels of thinking that connect to both the emotional connections of engagement and the strategic thinking of academic strategies. When you look at this rubric, you would think that there might be a balance between the tasks that we did. We expected to see that, but what we actually found was this. 82% of the tasks in kindergarten through 12th grade, in the 17,000 plus classrooms, 82% of the tasks fell on the left-hand side of the rigor divide. That means tasks where students were asked to accept a thought from the text, from the teacher, from the source, repeat that thought, think in that thought, get faster at that thought, but no original thinking. Only 6% of the tasks we saw kindergarten through 12th grade required kids to think across the rigor divide with analysis or creation or evaluation, where a strategy was really a strategy, not just an instructional procedure, where the personal response was my thought explained and here's the logic behind that, where the learning with others was interdependent between kids. Now, if you're a math teacher or you just are doing math in your head, you'll notice that 82 and 6 do not add to 100%, so we have a little problem here. The missing 12% occurs in tasks when kids do not have a cognitive moment across the rigor divide. In other words, they're accepting information, but they're engaged in the product. So this occurs when kids don't have a thought because they just downloaded information, but they put all that information into a presentation or a PowerPoint. And the engagement was in building the presentation, not in the thinking. We see this with posters, we see this with projects, we see this with dioramas. I am not opposed to any of those products because there are lots of skills in the development of a product. But I'm wondering if 6% of the time thinking across the rigor divide compared to 12% of the time being engaged without thinking is the balance we want for our kids. So we're often asked, well, based upon your research, John, can you make a recommendation about how often kids should be forced into the opportunity across the rigor divide with personal response that is cognitively at the application, the transfer level? See, one of the things I know that we're playing with in the mind process is we are always looking at our standards and asking, what is it we want kids to be able to do, know, and understand? The piece that I think we have to make sure is a part of that is and transfer. Whether we're talking about Hattie's version of transfer, what I know is when kids are across the rigor divide, they are transferring what they've learned to another moment, or they're taking information and transferring it in. High yield strategy, it's in your evidence-based practice. So when I get kids across the rigor divide and they're all lined up there, 20% of the time, in other words, when 1 out of 5 activities in a class, in a day, in an hour, I don't even know how to mathematically divide it up, it's just 20%. What we see is on a given Thursday, if kids going through a high school schedule, if 20% of their day is across the rigor divide and 25% or 21% or 19% is across the rigor divide the next day, and the next day across all their courses, that's a school that is really making the personalized learning moment come forward. And when we get to 19, 20, 21% of the time kids are across the Rigor divide, we see that the achievement gap from kids of poverty to kids of affluence closes. That has got to be one of our foundational goals in all of this work, is closing the achievement gap. So I want to take you to one more activity we can look at, just as an example of how we can add +1, add the personal response to cross the Rigor divide. So for example, on the left-hand side of the slide you're looking at, here's a very traditional activity in second grade. I know it's in your pathways, I've seen it. It's adding two-digit numbers to two-digit numbers. So I could, on the left-hand side, give my kids practice of, here are a number of two-digit numbers to add to two-digit numbers to get an accurate sum. I can cross the Rigor divide by saying this. You know what I want you to do, boys and girls? I want you to write a two-digit number that when you add it to another two-digit number, you will get a sum of 54. Before you get started though, I literally want you to take your whiteboard, and whether we're hybrid or whether we're distance, I want to see the first number you decide to write down, because that's your profile. I need to know if you're going to add a two-digit number to two-digit number to get 54, how do you start? So I may have a number of kids who write 40, or 30, or 20. And I'd like to see all my kids who start thinking in a clean 10, if you will. But I may also have kids who, because of their knowledge of doubles, may say, I'm going to start with 37 or 47. Oh wait, that won't work, because if I add a 7 to get 54, nope, that won't work. So I may have 27s and 17s. I can't have 7s. I may have kids who just randomly picked a number, 39? And I want to know, what are you going to do next? To look at the strategy. Is this a kid who's going to count up 40 and then add a 10 to 50 and then another 4? Or count all the way up? Or actually do the subtraction 54? The pathway, the personalized learning moment, is how kids go through the curriculum pathway their way. Where is the +1 moment? I can ask this, after everybody has then added two digits to two digits and we check the accuracy of 54, I can then say, here's where I want you to go next. Do another one. Tell me what number you're going to start with this time. Now, I may have kids who started with 39 who will now go, I'm just going to add one more to 39 to get 40. And then what they're going to end up doing is subtract one more from this add end to get the add end that gives me the sum of 54. As you guys are moving into the hybrid, I want to encourage teachers who are going to be in a hybrid model to think about, what do kids need you for? When do they need you the most? When are they going to have the independence to be released to tasks? In this moment of intense thinking, in this moment of feedback, in this moment of questioning as a formative, as a feedback loop, I want to make sure kids have me present for this. The repetition of the addition can happen at home, can happen during the asynchronous days. So again, in a moment, we're going to put you into another breakout where we're going to ask you to play with a choice of activities. One of the choices is to look at multiple activities that look just like this, where there is something we want kids to learn and practice on the left-hand side of the Rigor divide, but what could we add to the +1 that would throw them across? If you choose to do that activity, what I'm going to encourage you to do is pick a couple of those and play with them as learners yourself. How would you add the +1? What would you do in the task we give you on those slides? There's a second alternative choice, and that is to take the matrix, to take the rubric, and sit down for just a few minutes with the matrix and look for, where are the moments in your content area where we are already expecting kids to have personal response. And then check to see, does the personal response of explaining my idea, that top band of the orange section, does the personal response of explaining or justifying my idea as, I've got 2 or 3 ways to do this, but I'm going to find the best way, do they also line up to stay in the column? Because if we have an engagement strategy across the Rigor divide, but it doesn't pull the thinking over, we're in that 12% hole, where we are engaged in the product, in the end result, not the thinking. And if we're going to close the gap, if we're going to move kids further and farther in accelerating their brain, all the research from Medina and Hattie and Marzano says those strategies that require kids to do deeper analysis, evaluation, application of new moments, Those are the things that pull not only kids across the rigor divide, but pull our kids of poverty up to the same level of achievement as kids of affluence. So in our next breakout moment, as you can see from the screen, we're going to play with this personal response moment, the +1, adding it to something that is typically on the left-hand side of the rigor divide, simplifying fractions, factoring expressions, the First Amendment, body systems, and plot development. While those things certainly could live across the rigor divide, we're going to start with an activity where they probably don't, but then let the personal response serve as a lever to push the thinking across, hopefully with the engagement, hopefully with a strategic way of looking at the content that makes the content more elaborately encoded in the brain, more memorable, more receivable, more retrievable. When you enter your breakout, you'll be given a choice of one of those content areas. Pick the one that you're most interested in or the one you feel versed in. We'll see you back after the break.